When I first heard of Moana 2, as most people here know, I was honestly baffled. Not that I couldn't have seen the Walt Disney Company obviously go for a cash grab opportunity as evident by the success of their last sequels financially, but for the reason of announcing live-action Moana that is still set to come out about 10 years after the original. All movies seemingly spearheaded by The Rock and his confirmed popularity presence in the media, where Moana 2 was just from the get-go supposed to be first and foremost a series for Disney Plus like they did for other properties including Zootopia or Baymax, where I just appreciate the efforts that Disney Animation did to provide content of their own beyond movies on the service rather than the eras that preceded it. And I was really interested in simply watching a Moana series, knowing my own love of Moana being one of my favorite Disney movies, including the fact of my own Polynesian roots. So when I just heard about the sequel, I just went in with the typical cautious optimism, knowing about the crew who clearly worked on it as a series but turned it into a movie as released by Bob Iger earlier this year. And it's just safe to say, Moana 2 is clearly just a Disney Plus series stitched into a movie. One that I consider to be overall a decent sequel, meaning it's not bad, but it's also not great nor good. Something we all know is par for the course of any Disney sequel, knowing the last few years that refused to change nor wants to learn from its mistakes to tell a real story of its own. The ones that really make you question, was all of this necessary? Is it just that Disney is cursed by Walt himself who didn't believe in making sequels? Because I certainly feel nothing is improved from this. It's still a decent watch if you accept it as is, which should have been in the first place as a series, but hardly anything more than that. But I also do feel like general families will enjoy or have a good time with at least the film, considering the great performances of Outly E, The Rock, and others when we do consider the stigma around critical or public reactions to past animated movies. Because if there's one thing that is certain, this is a far better film compared to the likes of Wish, Strange World, or even the past sequels like Frozen 2 and Ralph Breaks the Internet, which is honestly not saying much, being a low bar to pass when you have a film that is better than those last two mistakes of a sequel, the greatest advantage that Moana 2 can say it truly has. Again, if you look at the details of the journey, it does feel a little more complete compared to that. Not that this one actually feels complete overall, but it still has something more than what the others can say for its own story. And then you still do have to give it credit for its animation. Despite having a film clearly designed for a series, they did a terrific job on the visuals and the way characters interact with each other and the world as we expect from the original itself. Ones that make you question again, why should you make a live action remake when you have visuals that can stand out like this, even in the original, and why should you accept that 2 years from now when they're still bent on making that a film when you just released this in theaters? A bold move, you might say, to even release this in said theaters, having that much confidence in a film that turns you back to the cozy era of the better half of direct-to-DVD sequels at the very least, which is what I should note that this movie actually exceeds at being. Because going back to the point I made about this film being more complete than say a film like Frozen 2, which did not know exactly what it wanted to say at the end or at other various parts in the middle, Moana 2 is a film that does not properly ties itself back together within its bigger plot. Various scenes, because it was originally a series, seem more stitched together with no legit thread to actually pull it all back in. Again, it still is more complete to what the end goal is compared to say Frozen 2, but several scenes just don't interact with each other well enough to be stitched into a cohesive narrative. Weren't saying that there are plenty of new characters to tag along, but their involvement apart from a few major acts hardly justify themselves even joining in. Just more of extra weight to spice it up rather than to properly serve a story or a character on its own. And the music itself is clearly not as strong as the original. Sure, I do like some of them, as you will notice, but then you will also notice it isn't the highs of Lin-Manuel's involvement of the original, thinking it'd be better served in a film like Mufasa, of all things for Mr. Scuttlebutt over here. But overall, it's again like the movie itself as not something that you would hate, but just appearing in a more rapid fashion that would be fit for a series rather than a movie. Like seriously, you won't be singing these songs in public like you did from before, like How Far I'll Go or You're Welcome. And thinking about all of this makes me question, what were they even planning to release this year if they had any movies? Because it does speak volumes when the best you can do at this current moment in time, after flops like Wish and Strange World, is a decently mediocre sequel at best that is more of a TV movie that at least doesn't offend anybody for doing anything too right or wrong. If you like Moana in the first place, you will like this as well, as I have done for many scenes, but if you were expecting something else like a good proper sequel, you won't find much to either say any way of the spectrum. It's something that wants you to feel good about it, hardly veering from the path if you loved it as it didn't want to damage a balanced relationship, or unbalanced if you simply talk about Disney animation as a whole these days. Just tiptoeing around the actual answer, calling this a very safe move. A very safe movie that doesn't want to do wrong, and I mean that 100%. Wanting to be on the side of its audience and nothing more. To which I also have to say I'm fine with how they play their villains, similar in the case of the original. Of course centering around a god, if you get what I mean, but not ending things on meaning there was much more to come. Still obviously on the series sense, which I wanted them to do, but they didn't do that considering the entire post-credits scene. Yet on the other hand, it isn't as strong as the original, and some scenes that make you question if a character is shaped a certain way doesn't actually turn out like that. And that is something I really want to mention too about this entire movie. They reintroduce characters you knew from the original as a certain way, but they end up not as originally thought, having something to tag along like it's no big deal. Each sequence of events does have its own side story because it was a series, but doesn't act like it's a huge thing considering the entire overall plot that is resolved at the end, which honestly to that end, it feels too fast for a singular film to actually end things on compared to the actual plot of Moana. Things in that film actually felt structured and ended the way that it needed to be, with events that actually needed to be properly fleshed out, which thinking about that also now, we're actually going back similar to Frozen 2 again, and I cannot believe it. I cannot believe how unfinished these things seem to be, where there's a huge chunk missing to make it feel like a proper story that you would accept and have the gall to even dare make this a film worthy of a theatrical release. Because at the end of the day, what can you really say that makes films like these a good idea other than money, other than its intended purpose and the original productions that wanted to explore these properties in a different manner, like as a series that has time to actually show things in separate episodes rather than a full movie that needs to cram everything in to sell you a point. Like, why can't we have that? Why do some Disney properties released as series seem to work better as movies instead, and the movies that are released seem to work better as series? It all comes down to a confusing mismanagement of the company producing who knows what, having these films left and right come out of production, and series that doesn't know what it wants to be. We may not know what goes on inside the company, but we can have some kind of idea by the way we react to films like this. And we need them to do better. Only saying this because I know for sure when sequels don't do much, harm the reputation, and play on the good graces of appeasing what the audience expects, still succeeds at the very least, financially of course. But how that would exactly play out, like make $1 billion or over that amount, I'm not exactly sure, but at the very least I am confident it will make money and a profit to actually be proud of. With again just simply having a film that follows by the book course that would hardly make anyone angry. And if I find someone who actually hates this, I would generally be surprised because there's nothing really to be mad at unless you're talking about the Disney strategy of producing films or content overall. It just doesn't want to do anything hurtful to its audience other than be a movie that extends off of the last movie. But after all this negative talk, let's try to end things a little more positive. Moana is still enjoyable as ever, creating new bonds and relationships that you would adore, especially with your sister that you see in the trailers. You still feel emotional about what you did even as the other characters hardly exist. And honestly, I enjoyed the comedy in some parts too, such as the fun moments having some characters speak to the nonsensical nature of Disney heroes singing or Hey Hey being the boat snack he is. Or the fact that some moments in the film actually have stakes for the main ones we knew, having more scenes that make you fear what could happen compared to the original that had some bits here and there, but not as much to the point of nearly death, if you get what I mean, even if said scenes do not properly develop such stakes to feel earned in that movie sense. And to which I do still feel passionate about two songs in this film that I can enjoy on occasion. Still, like I said earlier, clearly not as strong, but decent enough for the film. But again, also not enough to be fully memorable like songs you see on Disney's own music channel, where Moana is literally responsible for half their most viewed music videos from a movie that is one of the most streamed in all of existence. Still incredible considering well over films like Frozen. Also, another positive fact is Tamora Morrison, who plays Tui, Moana's father, actually gets to sing in this film, because in the last film they actually had another singer, Christopher Jackson, provide his singing voice. To which I didn't understand because I knew Tamora Morrison actually did some singing because of his performance in 2022 at Star Wars Celebration, so having him here sing one of the songs is a bit of an upgrade at the very least, and I'm thankful Disney was able to provide that. And going back to the great visuals this movie has, and the fact that this was a series, I actually find this more fitting to be better released 2 years ago rather than now, depending on how far the development was going on back then, and knowing how Strange World would turn out being. More people just would have been excited for this film at that time, considering it hasn't been long since Encanto was released, which sadly still remains to be the highest point Disney had in recent times compared to what happened soon after. Like, if you consider a great movie just releasing getting a fantastic reputation, your next logical step will be to continue the good graces rather than have people completely ignore it or whatever happened during that time that had its worst box office performance. Sure, you still had bad factors like a bad CEO too that dictated things, but if that were the case, since you did get a great roll of original animated films like Raya, Encanto, or Pixar releasing what they did, maybe people would accept what came out more. That's still a hypothetical, of course, where you can't say that would turn out too much different from a very safe movie and a sequel, considering that all other studios like DreamWorks produce pretty great ones besides their slop, but something that still wouldn't hurt to try for its time. But really, to tie things back together, this is actually just simply the product of them reacting the way they did to the last 4 years of the company. The executives hardly knowing what is right or wrong anymore with the fans. They just want to produce something that fits the billing, and plucking in a series out in front of theaters is just the only way they see how to fix it. And while it clearly has its glaring issues as that kind of film, a TV film at best as I would like to say, I think most people are going to be okay with its existence. One that's not necessary nor hurtful to even actually exist. Having fun with characters we all love at the very least, and that's the most positive thing you can truly say about the state of Disney at that very moment. Where to end things off, we just have to note that Disney can do better. They can champion better stories or sequels for those ideas as they pioneered in the past. The spark that lit the entire industry to what it is now, but how they can't or won't even see that anymore. And God willing, I will join this company one day to see that back, but content and disappointed to where it is right now. And boy, I really do not think I have much hope for Zootopia 2 next year, to be honest with you, if this is how things turn out. Where it's just a matter to how far they're willing to really go to actually see that. And I'm all done. Goodbye.